Hello everyone, my name is Clive Swansbourne. Welcome to Piano Insights. Today we're going to be looking at the Fantasy in D minor by Mozart. This is one of his most famous pieces, rightly so I think. It's very short, but it is full of ideas and full of different styles and operatic gestures and things. It's a very interesting piece. It was written in his, when he was about 26 in 1782. Within a few years, he was to have written, literally within the next 5 years, he was to have written The Marriage of Figaro and Don Giovanni, and I think Così fan tutti as well. Some of his greatest operas were just on the horizon at this point. And it's almost like he was flexing his operatic muscles when writing his instrumental music at this time and beyond. I mean, right through to the end of his life, his instrumental music reflects his operatic thinking. And I think we can find some examples in this piece. It's a fantasy, which means that it has an air of improvisation about it. It doesn't have a strict form. The piece starts off with a slow introduction, which is almost like a toccata introduction of the Baroque period, where the keyboardist is invited to just test out the keys. Toccata meaning touched. This could have been called a toccata if it were written in the Baroque period, but the name fantasy sort of morphed into something more improvisatory like this, whereas in the Baroque period it had been less so. So these terms kind of switch from age to age. But the fantasy in this period, anyway, was quite an improvisatory kind of piece. So he starts off with this slow introduction, deep and dark in the piano, rising up at the very end, very beautiful. And then the main meat of the piece is an adagio. It's sort of a lament. It's an adagio in D minor. But the theme itself isn't very long. It's just a few kind of gestures, a few musical phrases of great expressivity. It's almost like what we would call a recitative in opera, almost, except it has kind of an aria-like feel to it. So maybe we could call it an arioso or something. Because it doesn't last very long. It's not a full-length aria. And then we move to different ideas, as we'll see. And he goes, let's say, call the Adagio theme A, then we go to B, which is more a stern kind of proclamation. And this rather seemingly playful idea, but it's not playful. Well, I'll tell you why in a minute. Then back, so we've had A, B, C, A, B, C, D we've had. We're back to B here. And then we have a sort of a scale, and then we're back to C and D, and then another scale and back to A. So it's quite a complex mosaic of parts, but it works beautifully. It has an improvisation quality, but also it has ideas which repeat and develop within the few pages that the piece lasts. And when the fantasy, the improvising part of the fantasy comes to a close and we move from D minor to D major, the improvisation kind of disappears for a while. It becomes more of a dance. And this leads to a sort of cadenza at the end and then a final few measures to round the piece off. So let's go into it and look at it in some detail. There's nothing very operatic about the opening. It's very instrumental. This, as I say, it has its it has its ancestry in the toccatas for harpsichord by Bach and his contemporaries. various ways of playing this. There is the echo way, which is to play and then a softer version. I think that so many of these are repeated, though, that might become a little bit obvious. So be careful of that. But I do think that whether you do it or not in one or two of them, I think doing them on all of them is too much. You should shape everything. So think of this as a melodic line, not just as a sort of... No, it's definitely... Now this is where how much pedal comes into play is a problem. How much should one use really here? Something in between. So take it off in the second part of each measure. I think is quite nice. I like that. It depends partly on the piano and partly on how clear it is when you do, if you do use pedal completely, how clear that can be made. I do think that reducing pedal on the way to this more melodic section, which is suddenly very expressive, it's no longer just simply broken chords. So, not having pedal all the way through here. I mean, it's pretty that, but I think it's more interesting if you clear it out. I mean, I'm already clearing out. So we're already, our ear is used to a clearer sound there, and then that becomes a sort of answer to this phrase. Down we go. As it descends, do a diminuendo, I think is very effective there, and a bit of a rit too. Make it as absolutely as expressive as possible. That one's a beautiful one. As we'll see, he uses that chord later on. And one of the most decisive chords in the entire piece has that harmony on it. A B flat major. Okay, so after this rise and fall of the arpeggio and this very low note, which is held with a fermata, and then after the after the note, which has the fermata, you have a fermata rest. Or at least the whole measure is marked with a fermata. So lots of silence. Don't be afraid of silence. This piece has several of them, and they're very dramatic. And then we go into the sterner music. rush those, and they're too expressive for that. This, if you do, it's too jolly somehow. Take your time. All right, so getting this this theme as expressive as you possibly can is the problem here. Now, what you want to do is, he doesn't mark phrases, he doesn't mark slurs over the melody. He marks slurs over these, but he doesn't mark them over the melody. So I think just playing them legato is not quite what we need. And again, it's pretty, but what I find, it's more anxious than that. And when you're anxious, you're kind of a little short of breath. More like that, sort of, not quite so smooth, not quite so pretty. And he doesn't mark them staccato, but I think we can think of more of a non-legato approach with pedal. You still have pedal, but it's more of a, rather than, which is too shaped somehow. We don't need to shape it quite so much. And these, super soft. And hold them down, because you're going to have to take the rests. Here, for example. We've got to clear it out without any hiccups here. If you're playing too much like that, you get a hiccup. So even when you're lifting pedal up, it's got to sound legato, so keep your fingers really close. Now make sure that the two phrases which are the same length have different character. This one, I sort of emphasized perhaps a little too much there. You want to make this sound like it's the question, it's the yearning, it's the questioning. And then this is more of a resolution to this. This is the, and then it's more affirmative, like it's more decisive. Not necessarily louder, maybe a little more confident, but it has to be different. You have to sort of experiment. There are different ways of doing that. You have to experiment which is going to be the best for you, the one that you can understand best. Maybe this should be more tentative, and this. More affirmative, more confident. Or you could do it the other way around. So those are two different ways of doing it, but I think if you just play them differently, it's going to sound so much more interesting than playing them the same. And when we get to here, put the pedal down first, or make sure that this is pedalled. Now if it's too loud, then you don't get the slur effect. If you do this, I don't like it quite as much. It down a little bit, and then soft here. He's very specific about the phrasing here. He has staccatos, but with a slur. So I think that it's related to, which you could play with the pedal, but you can't really use pedal on there, I don't think. don't hold any of these. I think they need to be not staccato, but a little bit more tentative. More ethereal. And this last one you can put the pedal down on. I like that anyway, you don't have to do it. I like it. And then... So this has really set up the mood. It's very, not lamenting quite, but unsure of itself. Emotionally insecure, I would say. And maybe the husband comes in and says, what are you moping about? Quit the moping. There's a mountain of sort of nuance that you can put in these. And I think if you're thinking of some sort of scenario, it helps. Like someone who's very insecure about what to do next, you know, what to do. Or maybe this. I'm not quite so sure, you see. There are different ways of doing this as well. Just don't make them the same. And don't hurry them either. Kids tend to, when they get to there, it sort of gets too fast. No, it's still anxious. This is not playful music, it's anxious music. It's still within the Adagio, you see. Mozart marks staccato, a slur. And whenever you get a slur, it's got to be legato and drooping. Seems to me like our character, after all this anxiety, is a little depressed here, but becomes kind of determined to fight her fate here. And so I think you can push it along a bit, make a crescendo there, make it quite willful in certain ways. And then maybe she rushes out of the room determined to do something really dramatic. Mr. Stern comes back on stage, determined to put a stop to all this rushing around. And we get a return of this sighing thing. This really is, she's getting into quite a state. I say she because I always think operatically of there being sort of a rather domineering male character, in which case that, and someone who's trying to escape his domineeringness, you know. And we get another of these scale passages. Now these two passages can be practiced in ways which might save you time. The first one it's the same pattern repeating. Just, you take those 4 and those 3 and then add those and then repeat. Or you could do it this way. Start off with that and then just think of this as a scale going down. And then That's the easiest way, because you've got a scale, 4, then 3 notes, and then this upside down triad of A major, and then the scale again, and then it stops. So that's the way to do that one. And then this one is a little bit more complicated, but basically same kind of idea. You start with this odd note, and then you do the scale down to here, and then you do this little twiddle here. And then you have the same scale as you had before, but it goes a bit further. Instead of going, it goes down 3 more notes, you see. So it's not this time, but. And then you have this thing here. Sorry. Remember, you've got a natural, C natural there, and then a C sharp there. And then another one. So do it, I think do it in chunks. Do one of them. Start off with this one. The one which actually starts a little way into it, so that you can get used to doing these little chunks of it. And then that's where it stops. And then maybe you can separate that one. You could separate that if you wanted to. It's a very useful way of practicing, and you'll find that you learn it much more quickly. If you can do that quickly, I mean, it's not that hard, and that's not hard. And then it will learn itself pretty much. And when you get to the bottom, don't be in any hurry. He doesn't hold your hand there, but you've got to slow up. I mean, you're going to be playing the first half fairly fast, or you'll ease into a quicker tempo, and then you'll slow back up again towards the top. Because you don't want to sort of... That would be out of style. You've got to slow into this. And then we have the same thing, and then we get this again. Don't be heavy on that. Because this particularly, it's a sort of slur in contramotion. Now, this he does a little development here, extremely operatic. I like to think of our character as thinking of her lover. Maybe that's what she's been moping about. She's not sure about her lover, whether he loves her or not. And here we get it in compact form. Let's put words to it. Does he really love me? I think I should hope. I'm sure I should hope. Maybe not. Maybe I shouldn't hope. Now, I'm going to go and ask him. I'm going to take the reins into my own hands, and I'm going to ask him whether he loves me or not. And we get this, what's called a Neapolitan harmony. And then it goes back to our key. In fact, it doesn't go to D minor anymore, because yes, indeed, he does love her, so everything is happy. And this is operatic also because the piece ends with sort of a quicker melody, a quicker part of the piece, and fairly short too. And this is typical of arias by Mozart. There's the most famous being L'aciderem la mano, which is the scene in Don Giovanni in which Don Giovanni is trying to seduce a peasant girl called Zerlina, with the husband just next in the next room, pretty much. Something like that. And then after the seduction takes place, what happens usually at the end of these arias is some sort of resolution. The slower part of the aria is thoughtful and has a problem, maybe a problem to solve, or an emotional state to escape. Well, the emotional state which Zerlina is suffering is indecision. Should I allow this rake to seduce me? Well, her resolve weakens, and she decides, yes, I will decide to do that. So we get... at the end, which is a very short and very lively and very happy, and they dance off into the sunset. Something similar happens here, I think. And take your time over this. This is where the crux of the scenario is. You know, between each little phrase, there's silence, and we're thinking, what's her next thought going to be? What's her next emotion going to be? Is she going to hope? And then suddenly we're aware that she is full of resolve. In this case, she's not. Her resolve doesn't weaken, her resolve strengthens, and she goes and wins her major key finale here. Now, this one, after another break here, and then two very short chords, but not fast. One, don't rush those, and then another silence, and then we're into the allegretto. And repeat. That particular phrase here, well, all of this in fact, to get the delightful charmingness of it, of the music, you need to follow fairly closely the phrasings, so it's not too legato. That's not interesting enough, you see. It's not. No. Lean into it. And the rhythm here. Not. That's cheating. Now this is a slightly awkward passage. I have some fingerings to recommend. The Henley edition has good fingerings. 5 and 2 here, 3 and 1 here in the left hand, and then you jump up to 5 and 1. Play that all together. You don't want to be putting that before the beat. And you repeat that, and then we get just rompy happiness here. I like that. Daya, daya. Sometimes I hear. That's wrong. It should be. surprisingly, Mozart didn't finish this piece. The last few measures are written by someone else, but it works very well. He might have done something a little more interesting, but it works absolutely fine. We don't notice it until we're told that Mozart didn't write it. Anyway, lots of very interesting operatic characteristics in this piece. It's very essential when playing Mozart's music to get to know at least some of his opera. If it's just one, that's fine. It could be either. I would recommend probably The Marriage of Figaro. The only thing about The Marriage of Figaro is the plot is quite complicated, and you need to know what's going on. There are lots of ins and outs in the plot. But once you get to know it, it's delightful, and every plot twist has a musical equivalent in the characteristics of the music, and can be very funny, can be whimsical, all sorts of things. Don Giovanni is more of it has a dark side to it, but it has an equal amount of variety. An astonishingly powerful piece, absolutely wonderful piece. It was Beethoven's favourite. He thought it was the only serious Mozart opera. Beethoven was a bit of a prude when it comes to the kind of shenanigans in the plots of some of Mozart's operas. But he had endless regard for Don Giovanni, which some people believe is his greatest. If you have to make those value judgments, Don Giovanni is often quoted as being the greatest of the Mozart operas. And I certainly see a sketch of that kind of style going on in this piece. So I recommend this piece to everyone. I thank you all very much for listening, and I hope to see you in future videos. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you. Bye-bye.